Yes, an unexpected journey for certain, and one that is still teaching me today. Hello, I am Tina Moody, and I am author of The Spiritual Awakening of an Analytical Mind, along with co host to the podcast Intuition Talks. And as of today, I am the creator of the YouTube channel Tina L. Moody. So, welcome back. If you were part of my short-lived series introducing the book before it was published, and if you're new, welcome as well. So if the title caught your attention, then let me explain. I come from corporate insurance sales, along with real estate investing and sales as well. I did not come from the literary world, but that did not deter me. So let me give you the quick and dirty as to how my journey of self-discovery kind of diverged into this book journey and allowed me to write a book called, of all things, The Spiritual Awakening of an Analytical Mind. So how did I go from where I was to this place of writing a book, especially on spiritual awakening? First, there was a lot of healing and recognizing that I had healing to do. Like so many of us adults out there, we have lived on this expectations train, right? We get caught up in the routine of life and just stay on those tracks. And so self-exploration was nowhere on my radar. I don't know if you can relate to that at all. So when divorce then thrust me in front of a mirror, we'll say, to take a look at myself. And then, quite honestly, I didn't have the kids as much because they were their dad part of the time. I had nowhere to hide. So I realized first I needed to finish falling apart. And then I needed to start picking myself back up and figuring out who it was that I wanted to be, because I didn't want to go back to where I was before. And part of that reinventing and discovering myself was attempting to tap into the creative source that I had locked away a long time ago and assumed that it wasn't there. And for me, that occurred in baby steps because I am a tortoise in everything that I do. So early on, that was around, honestly, because of where I was, it was around community, discovering the community that would be there to support me. It was around just the act of creating something. Like the best way to encourage creating is to create itself. But it was also around some Reiki healing. That was a new thing for me. Intuitive healing, discovering rituals and discovering routines that I could incorporate into my mornings to let me start my day with more intention. It was around prayer, which had never been part of my life and is now a daily part of my life. It was around incorporating crystals. You can see I've got one right here, actually. It was around getting out in nature more because, quite honestly, I had kind of removed myself from that for many years as I was doing my adulting in whatever way I was doing it. So all of those things combined, and I'm sure more, helped to allow me to start to tap into that source energy, which was going to allow me to begin writing. The other thing that I just want to mention is that for me, and many of you could maybe relate to this or not, it was learning to not worry what others thought or my perception of what others thought about this new journey that I was on. The other judgment one was around this of creating, I guess, that, if I was going to focus on creating, what would other people think, or how, or would my, whatever I was creating be good enough? And I still need to work on these things to a large degree, but I'm chipping away at them because it doesn't matter. People are so caught up in their own worlds that it doesn't matter what we do as long as we are happy. And that has been a big lesson for me. So to get back to creating. So when we begin creating, this crazy thing begins to happen. We begin aligning with our inner self and our intuition becomes alive and awakens from its hibernation that, had been in a cave for quite some time. So then we begin to listen to that intuition, to the whispers that come to us and say, hey, maybe try this, or do this in this way, or maybe you should write, right? And whatever it may be for you. And it's really a beautiful thing that begins to open, but we have to take those steps. We can't go from A to Z. There's a lot of things in between there. And that's truly the abbreviated explanation, I guess, of how writing began to take hold in my life. Now, when writing began entering my world, I had no intention of writing a book. But it's interesting how things start moving into place for you. So remember that intuition I mentioned a couple minutes ago? It started awakening, came online, we'll say. And it started whispering to me that I needed to keep a journal of my spiritual escapades on this journey of self-discovery that I was on. So I began writing. And I was not a journaler up to that point with any sort of consistency, but what I was guided to do was to keep this journal, a daily journal, and to keep it for a year. And so I was trucking along, and unbeknownst to me, what was happening is that I was getting the practice of writing. I was also getting the practice of, as I had an experience and didn't know a lot about it, I would then research it, investigate it, and I would put that into the journal just so I'd have a place to reference back to and have the explanation already there. And so it's interesting how those pieces started coming together. And then a couple of my intuitive friends started seeing it as well. One intuitive friend saw a writer's bookshelf, as he said, that I had in my house, and he described it to me. And then another friend actually saw the book and saw a tie to the journal I was keeping. And in a giggly way, I got excited, and it gave me the validation I needed to continue with that journal, because a year is a long time. And so I kept doing that. And the next interesting thing that happened is books started arriving kind of on my doorstep, we'll say. And sometimes I wouldn't know the reason that they would arrive. It could be this somewhat unrelated autobiography, or a book, published 40 years ago that seemed relevant, or had a piece in it that I needed to absorb in me somehow, or we'll call them new age books may show up. So it was just interesting to me. It could be from a bookstore, it could be a recommendation, it could be from the used bookstore. And these books just kept showing up and feeding me with information that sometimes, again, there would be a nugget or two that I would then incorporate into the journal as well. And so it was this whole thing of writing daily and reading daily. So I want to read a quick quote for you from this book, Stephen King's On Writing, which is his memoir, is not one of his horror books. Stephen King is near and dear to many people, either from that genre or as a Mainer. And it is a quote that I have paraphrased and shortened and used many times over. Let me read it to you here quickly. It is this: if you want to be a writer, you must do two things above all others: read a lot and write a lot. There's no way around these two things that I'm aware of, no shortcut. So it seemed that the universe was putting those things together for me. Writing in the journal for a year, researching, putting more details into my writing, as well as all those books that were arriving. Beautiful. The next book that serendipitously arrived on my doorstep was one that shook me by my shoulders and said, no, Tina, you cannot have a book be a journal. No one would want to read it. And I did not cry in my soup. Instead, I thought, yes, you are right. And I began writing the manuscript that became this book. And I also used my journal from that year as a reference guide for that manuscript. So I knew I wasn't sad. I knew it was a process that I had to go through for whatever reason it was, many reasons likely, and it worked out. And I trusted, again, the process. So I began writing, and I continued to read, and that is all I can advise you. And that brings us to taking the leap. So while I was working on the manuscript over here on this side, I was researching and learning more about the publishing process through reading articles or watching videos. And I'm going to get into way more details in future videos on this stuff. So I'll give you the abbreviated version here because we all need to know this right out of the gate, in that whether you go the traditional publishing route or the self-publishing route, we all need a platform. And if you're anything like me, I really wasn't active on social media, didn't have a following there, nor did I have 30,000 email addresses of willing and waiting purchasers of whatever book I may produce in the future. So while I was working on the book, I began that process of building a platform to find those ready and willing buyers, right? Because that's what we all need. So again, we'll go into a lot more details later, but I will tell you that this was a full calendar year of kind of choosing different things and different routes to go down. As that calendar year turned in a very serendipitous way, I was exposed to a cooperative publisher, which is, we'll say, a little bit similar to a hybrid publisher with some nuances there. What I liked about this option was that it kind of married, I keep using that word, two different things. It gave me the certain things of self-publishing and certain things of traditional publishing, because they have their own vetted editors. They have their own graphic designer. They have their own relationship with printers. And I like that option, having never been in the literary world, because it was somebody to hold my hand and make it less scary, we'll just say. So I did their informational meeting. That was easy enough. The next step was, if I wanted to proceed, was to release certain chapters for them to do an editorial review. And that took me a minute of rewriting and reworking and rereading, just for me to let that baby out of my hands, because to that point, one person had read a few chapters. Otherwise, it was all me. And that was very vulnerable. But I did it. And the good news is, even though they marked it up a little bit, they found it as a viable book option, that it would be marketable. And probably more importantly, they vetted me, right? And now it was up to me whether I proceeded. So again, very scary. I took 6 weeks reworking, rewriting, rereading numerous, countless, endless times before I was ready to release that to the editor. And when I did, it was like standing naked on a stage, ready to be judged. It was the most vulnerable thing I'd probably experienced in a long, long time. But I did it, and it got me in the flow of things and made the decision-making process between self-publishing and traditional publishing much easier. The thing that was great about it as well is that it expedited the process, which was one of my big intents with this whole thing. So I skipped the process of doing query letters to 50 plus literary agents. I skipped the process of doing a 60-page book proposal. There's nothing wrong with those things, and they get you to the deals with the publishers. But I knew my intent for this book was to get it into the hands of people as fast as I could. Now, the route that I went, in addition to if I'd gone the self-publishing route, is that the author pays and foots the bill. And I was okay with that. I just wanted the book out as fast as I could, and with, the least amount of pain as possible. So over the course of the summer, that's what happened. It goes through all the graphic design stuff. It goes through all the various sets of eyes and edits and formatting, and then the proofs and reviewing proofs and all that. And my book eventually came out. And through that flow, could I have stepped off? Sure. I invested some money at that point, but until you print, it's not overly crazy. And it's funny, even the day that I picked up the books at the publisher's office, so not just the proofs, but actual physical books, I still reread the book that night, because the next step was for strangers to read my book. And I guess even more scary was that people I knew were going to read the book to support me, which is lovely, but nobody knew the contents of that book. Nobody knew this journey I was going to be on. So it was vulnerable in a sense of not only what I wrote, which was crazy enough, but that I'm saying I have something I want to say that needs to be heard, and I am writing in well enough that I can write a book. And it's just such a crazy journey, a vulnerable journey, one that I can't say enough about, but it exposes us in crazy ways and pushes our boundaries and makes us grow. And I can't recommend it enough for anybody that may be considering it, but put your big girl pants on because it's a ride for sure. So once the book was published and in my hands and I began hitting the road to do book fairs or book signings, although people would come up and talk to me about the book, they often were asking me about how to bring a book to life, because it seems like many of us out there from the non-literary world have a story to tell, and people are curious as to the process of that. And that is why I've turned the YouTube channel back on in 2023 and decided to start sharing the process that I went through, be that in self-discovery and about unleashing creativity so that I could write, about the writing process, about the publishing process. And that is what I want to share here with people who are like me, who may not be from that literary world. The other thing that I try to talk to people about and ask them in a nice way is why they haven't done it yet. Because I don't know that many people realize, me included, as to why we haven't told our stories yet. And sometimes we need to dig a little deeper, peel back some layers to figure why that is. And then we need to commit to this this new endeavor that we want to take on. We can all write a book. It all just depends on what our purpose is with it, or, you know, how far we want to see it go, kind of thing. So here I am. I've committed to myself somewhat reluctantly that I am going to come on and post videos every week. Some of those videos will be more practical, we'll call them, around the writing process, about clearing ourselves so that we can write and kind of getting through some of the muck there, as well as the publishing process coming from the lens of somebody that doesn't come from this world. And then I'm going to do some videos that dig into, very briefly, because they were only 15-minute videos, dig into some of the books, the writing books or the self-help books, so whatever they may be, books that I think will help people on this journey. And then there's going to be another set of videos that is going to be more of a behind the scenes kind of thing, that I will take you on the road with me or into the office with me, so you can see how maybe not sexy the life of an independent author is. So we're going to get into marketing, the book you already have in hand, as well as maybe writing another book, as well as kind of my podcast and any other things around building a platform that we need to do in order to support the book that we're putting out into the world. So I hope you will all enjoy that. I think it will be a fun mix of information and videos that we'll put out there. The first video will be posted next week, and that is going to be the superpowers of writing, because writing does unlock a lot of superpowers for us that help us not only in our writing, but in life in general. So thank you for listening to this. I hope you will join me next week and the weeks after that. I hope you will subscribe to the channel to help me out there a little bit as well. And in the meantime, have yourselves a magical week. You are able to create anything that you want out there. So let's just take those steps toward it. Take care.